Hello, Park family. Welcome back to another Conversations at the Park. Happy to be here with you guys on another Wednesday night or whenever you're watching this. I have with me two of my favorite people in the world. I have Mike Johns, who is one of our excellent youth ministers, and I've got Danielle Schrock, our children's minister extraordinaire. Between the three of us, we've got maybe a couple dozen years of parenting experience, maybe a couple dozen years of ministry experience. And so today, our conversation, the reason I bring Mike and Danielle here today is our conversation today is going to focus around how quarantine has impacted our children and what are we doing about that. How are we ministering to our kids in a way that not only just impacts little Timmy at home, but ways that impacts our entire church and the ways our entire church can be involved with that, because we know this is not just about individuals and just about small kids, and I hope they don't throw a fit next time they're in church, but how are we really cultivating the hearts and the minds and the spiritual lives of our children, both in our home and when they come here to church. So this quarantine thing has really been a really big curveball in our efforts to minister to our kids. And so let's just start off, if we could, with what have you guys noticed, either in your own homes. Mike, you got 2 kids. Danielle, you got 4. I've got 2. So Danielle beats us by a long shot, but so we're all here to learn from Danielle, actually. Today is what we're doing. So what have you noticed in your home and during the times when you have been able to minister to either your teens or the children? How are kids handling this?
Well, I would say one thing I've learned is the entire Lego Ninjago dictionary.
Yeah. Yes.
And I think I've learned more about myself in parenting them than anything.
Oh, what do you mean by that?
I think when I've examined, once we've taken away a lot of the extra things, all the busy things, the activities, I've learned what has been working and what hasn't been working with our kids personally. And just seeing how some of those things are contributing to their spiritual lives or not contributing to their spiritual lives, and other areas as well.
Sure.
And I would say learning definitely more about each of their personalities, stressors, anxiety, the way that they treat each other, learning that they can do hard things and we can do hard things, and just how vital each of our roles are in this. We think of ourselves as like a team sometimes. So
that's really valuable. So just learning a lot, not only about your kids, but you say about yourself.
Right. Right.
Which is huge. What's one example of something you've learned maybe just about yourself?
I would say, the habits that we have in our lives, and whether those are good or bad, and how they're impacting our kids as well, and especially once we were in close quarters with each other, and they're watching you 24/7. How those kind of play out when you're there together all the time, and what you're teaching them. And then we'll talk about this a little bit when we talk about some of the children's ministry stuff, but the lessons that we've been doing at home, realizing that a lot of their lessons really are my lessons as well. There's a lot of ways where I need to be learning alongside them, not just teaching them.
We see a lot of times where we present a children's lesson, and then maybe secretly, not so secretly, we think, yeah, I needed to hear that today.
Yeah.
That's something that definitely applies to me. This is definitely has some grown-up implications to all this, for sure. Mike, what have you experienced in your home? Or I know some of the youth group has been able to come up and interface with you guys a little bit during all this. What are some things that you've noticed about them and learned during this process?
Well, I just need to say Danielle learned about Lego Ninjago. I think I know what that is, but what I learned with my son is Cuckoo Kangaroo. Shout out to Kevin Pugh for pointing me to those YouTube videos. If you don't know what that is, if you're a parent with young kids, you need to go sing and dance with your child right now. I've done all of those on repeat during quarantine. But what's interesting from the youth ministry and the children's ministry, and also, like Kevin said, we have young kids. So there's that level on a personal level, but as far as like my role in watching teenagers versus children and how it's impacted them. So a child, in my opinion, because I have a 4-year-old and a 1.5-year-old, they really didn't notice that we were in quarantine. Maybe they noticed that I was home more, but preschool getting canceled. And I think my son Noah was having the time of his life. And if we told him there's no school this fall, I don't know that he'd be that sad. Something about a 4-year-old toddler, they just are, I don't know if we want to say resilient, or they just literally don't know what's happening in a pandemic world. But what I would hear from teenagers, and I would hear from parents of teenagers, my kid's going stir crazy. So what was happening with the teenager during quarantine is, we'll be safe with our parents and we'll enjoy. We get to have a few weeks off of school, party, play some extra video games, watch some extra Netflix. But then that took a toll. For sure by May 1st, if not way before, they were ready to just run through those doors, out the doors, and get to their friend's house, go outside and meet their friends. So I guess the teenage family had a lot more pressure put on them. Yeah. Whereas Noah didn't notice what was happening in the world, the 15-year-old was really being emotionally impacted because they were in isolation. All of us adults know what that feeling was, but the teenager, I realized how much they desire and need community. I think we all know that, but I think our children, I don't know what the age cutoff is, Danielle, but they were just enjoying time with mom and dad, and hopefully we have healthy homes where it's a place where they want to be there. But the teenagers, even with a healthy home with godly parents, those parents were saying to us, Mike, we're doing the best we can keeping them here safe and in quarantine, but they're kind of dying inside. They need, and I think stuff like Zoom was good for a few weeks and 6 weeks, but that took a toll on them. They could not, as much as we think teenagers are glued to a screen, this is actually what they truly need. And I think teenagers got the reminder that seeing their friends on social media and FaceTime, ultimately that didn't even do it for them. They needed to be with their friends. And that's impacted the way we've done youth ministry. We're doing a lot of things outdoors, but we know how much they need to be together. And I don't know, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, studies came out a few years ago that you guys may know about, that the top few influences in a child's life used to be parents, church, authorities, and probably 6, 7, 8 down the list was friends.
Yeah.
Well, in recent years, friends have jumped to number 1, and in a lot of cases, it's not even close.
Yeah.
The number 1 influence on our children are their friends.
Yeah.
And so, you do hope their home lives are healthy and a healthy place for them to be. But they rely so heavily on those relationships that this has been. I really have had a heart for families with teens and even preteens. The younger generation who really does know what's going on. This has been really, really hard for them. Yeah. Have you guys noticed, even in the past few weeks, really late May into June, mid-June, that people are like the honeymoon phase of this, if there ever was a honeymoon phase. You know, there's this little bit of like, oh, this unique thing that we understand is going to have world history implications. Oh, we're in the middle of it. Wow. You know, at some level, it's like kind of neat that we're in the middle of this. That's gone.
Yes.
And people, and even and we're seeing it in teens, and sometimes you start to see it a little bit in the attitudes of some of the younger kids, and certainly we're seeing it in the lives of adults, that we're just kind of done with it. Have you guys noticed that in the lives of children that you've been dealing with? Has that, even the more recent weeks of this, taken another turn towards, okay, this is hard, we got to figure this out?
I would say even, I think just our human nature is that we kind of need the next thing. We can't be doing the same thing over and over again. And I would say, you know, we've seen just in ministry, just the cycle of people being screened out, and we, you know, now we need to know what's the new normal. I think our kids really want to know. I mean, just in normal circumstances, they want to know what the expectations are. They want to know what the routine is. They want to know what the structure is. And so I think especially as we move back towards a time where, okay, we would be starting school again, whatever that's going to look like. I think people are even, I mean, especially parents are anxious to know what that's going to look like. And I think at some point, if they're not there yet, because they're still enjoying summertime, I think they are going to get to that point where, I mean, I think there's a reason God invented seasons, because we all are ready for the next one by the end of whichever one you're in.
Yeah. No, it's really great. So what do we do? We find ourselves in this place, and we have a heart for our children, and not just those of us who have been in that ministry or in that ministry. This church and so many people we know have a heart for our kids and want to see our kids thriving. So what do we do? Solve all the world's problems with our children right here and now. But I say that in jest, but you guys have put a lot of thought into what to do now. So what are some ways that in ministry and even in the home we can sort of start attacking this big issue of cultivating the hearts and minds of our children?
If you know me and Danielle well, you know at some point I'm going to drive home, at least me, I'm going to drive home one key thing that I've been trying to pass on to parents long before COVID came, and that it's parents are the number one spiritual influence in their kid's life. And Kevin's right. Friendships and social media, those have an influence. But as far as who was meant to pass down the faith of Jesus Christ to the child, it's always dating back to the days of Moses, Deuteronomy 6. You know I'm going to read this passage if you know me. Starting in verse 4, it says, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all of your heart and all of your soul and all of your strength. These commandments I give you are to today be on your hearts. Impress them on your children. Talk about them when you sit at home, when you walk along the road, when you lie down, and when you get up. Tie them as symbols on your hands, bind them on your foreheads, write them on the door frames of your homes and your gates."
And maybe never before has it been more important for the home to be a symbol and a communication piece, the communication piece of all these important things.
Yeah, and Kevin, you're right. I think Danielle and I were talking about how hopefully it's been a wonderful, encouraging reminder to parents of how great of a role we get to play with our kids as far as being the spiritual influencer and that has these type of conversations. I know maybe in the 80s or 90s, it was probably easy just to drop your kid off at church and think that was going to be the thing. Mm-hmm. The best thing that a parent could do is get their kid to church. Sure. But I think what we've learned around these past 5 or 10 years, if not really driven home during quarantine and during this COVID world is, oh, I need to be around my kids, and they are watching me. Like Danielle said, I'm under surveillance. There's a camera, and they are watching every move I make. So me being healthy, I've heard a quote before, Kevin, you can't give your children what you don't have. And so you asked, what can we do? And the church plays a vital role in helping parents and feel equipped.
No doubt.
But we had a hopefully good, but maybe a painful reminder that it's up to Kevin and Amanda, Chris and Danielle, Mike and Brittany, for those kids to know the Lord. And any other influence we can put in their life, Kevin, is wonderful, from church, that village, but it starts with us. And I think Danielle did a wonderful thing during quarantine. My son had these anger emotions sent home from inside out. And then there was this fruit of the Spirit stuff. Danielle, do you want to, I know that we talked about with Noah, hey, I'm feeling an anger emotion. What am I supposed to do with that? That's normal, but what fruit of the Spirit can we use? We've been talking about those things with him. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, we kind of saw eventually with the children's ministry that trying to do at home what you would do in a normal Bible class really wasn't going to work very well, because most of the activities are set up to have a large group of kids. So we had to end up changing our focus and go with these family devotionals. And like you said, whether it was painful or wonderful, all the families are becoming the children's minister, the youth minister, in the spiritual leader, which they were in the first place. And hopefully we've been able to resource everybody with things that are meaningful and helpful. And like I said, I'm benefiting from them myself, and just putting more of that emotions and fruits of the Spirit vocabulary into our everyday lives and every situation. And with 4 kids, you definitely have many opportunities for that. And that's just kind of our goal, is to help equip everybody to continue doing that. And it's definitely changing, I think, the way we do ministry in this time. And I would even say that we even have one who's moving on to the youth group. So we can't do it alone either. We're feeling especially blessed. Elle's moving up to youth group, and we're going to rely on those resources as well. So it's kind of 2 parts.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing is we totally agree that the church, and we believe the church should play a role in the spiritual development, spiritual formation of our families as a whole. But ultimately, when I'm presented before God and who is responsible for my children, me saying, but Danielle's lessons really just didn't work for my kids. That's probably not going to fly. And so I do feel this major responsibility, and all this has done, this quarantine stuff, all it's done is drive that point home even more. So we are incredibly blessed to have ministers like you guys that are forward thinking about how to do this, but also encouraging families. It's in your home. It's in your home. It's in your home. But as far as resources are concerned, what sort of things would you recommend for how to move forward from this point?
So something, my wife went through a book with 2 other moms, and you can have debates like that. Scripture should be our only place that we receive wholeness and healing and direction and guidance, and I agree. But sometimes reading a book from Francis Chan, or a book from Louis Giglio, or your favorite Church of Christ author, whatever, I think there are resources out there, and what Brittany passed on a resource to me from Jenny Allen called Get Out of Your Head, and she does Get Out of Your Head for adults and then for children. And I wanted to pass along just one tip on something that I've heard from her. So this book was, it was based on 2 Corinthians 10:5 that says we take captive of every thought that we have and we make those thoughts obedient to Christ. And I'll relate all this to parenting and quarantine and COVID. But what we have learned is if we are the influencer of our children and they're watching us and we're at home with them even more than ever, we have to get healthy. Like Mike has to know how to deal with his anger and my anxiety, right? Like, so it starts with me figuring those things out about myself. Danielle talked about learning more about herself. Well, I wanted to give 4 tips that I've heard from her resources on how do you deal with your kids' anxiety that they're feeling. They have felt a lot of anxiety and worry and stress in their isolation, and they've had a lot of thoughts circulating about themselves. And I want to start with a passage. Philippians 4:6-8 says, "Do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your request to God, and then the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and minds in Christ." And verse 8, "Finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, noble, right, pure, lovely, admirable, excellent, or praiseworthy, think about such things." So there's one piece there about thinking about what is true. And so a tip that I heard and I wanted to pass along to parents, whether you have Henry Peters, El Schrock, Noah, whatever age your kid is, there are 4 tips on how to help your kid deal with their current anxiety that has just increased over the past 3 months. Yeah. The first thing, listen to your kids. What are they afraid of? What's making them anxious? So on this point, listen to your kids. Parents sometimes, I don't know if we've been called helicopter parents, lawnmower parents. We've had a lot of titles slapped on us because we do not want to see our kids go through any pain, so we run to the rescue, we fix all their problems. Yeah. But this point, listen to your kids and what is causing anxiety in them. This is you sitting with your kid and saying, what are you feeling right now? How are you feeling? What is bringing anxiety to you? What is the fear you're feeling? And sit there and listen. And even when you hear something in your experience, you know exactly how to fix it. Delay that solution giving that you want to do and fully listen. And the point is for them to be able to hear what they're saying. They need to hear what they're even saying. Yeah. Help give them space. So that points to our second one. Help your child think about what they're thinking. So if you allow room for listening on the first step, now you've created space where they've articulated those feelings and they've brought the thoughts to the surface. So you're like, oh, so you are feeling stressed. Let's think about that a little bit more. Let's talk about that. So bring those thoughts to the surface by just not solving the problem. Help them think about what they're thinking. Now, point number 3, help them figure out what is true. So Philippians 4:8 says, whatever is true. And so like if you help them develop those thoughts and bring them to the surface, and you connect those things to what God says about it, then they can be like, oh, that is directly a lie from Satan. That's a worldly thought.
Which, how important is it today to point to something that's true?
More than ever.
More than ever. And even in a time where you have social issues that we want to know truth, and we want there to be a firm truth, and there's so many angles. But even you've got this health crisis where nobody knows what's true.
Yes.
Even the medical professionals are a little bit stumped on what to do, how to behave. So, wow, how important is it now, even more than ever, to look at what's true? Yeah,
and then the 4th one is encourage your child to pray over those thoughts they've had and submit those to God. So that is exactly what Philippians 4:6-8 tells us to do. We're called not to be anxious. So what do I do with that feeling? We listen, help them think about what they're thinking. What do we say? The third thing is sort it out. Is this a truth or a lie? Can we tell from God's word? And the fourth is, let's pray about that. Let's leave that to God. And that's just, I think during quarantine, we can just say, hey, you need to preach at your kids the Bible. You're the minister. But really what it is we're learning, it's a conversation. Like, how are you feeling?
And anytime I've ever done anything like that with my kids, anytime I try to process, maybe you guys have seen this, the actual anger of the moment is totally put at ease. Maybe not totally, but at least at some level put at ease when they're able to, when they know somebody's listening to me about what I'm feeling.
Yeah.
Some personal validation in kids as young as that was happening with 5-year-olds at my house. And so almost as young as you can get, that validation of somebody's listening to me kind of disarms the tension of the moment.
And what you just said was the key. So how we don't disarm that is us as helicopter lawnmower parents just trying to we think we know what's best, so we're going to fix it.
Yeah.
What they really need is just to be able to listen and process and know they have someone on their side helping them out of that thought process.
A lot of times, and this is a favorite song of mine in talking about God, says, "You give me something to hold on to."
Yes.
And I love that idea, because right now as we're looking around for like, okay, what's true? What's something I can believe in that everybody knows is true and correct? I got nothing.
Where do I hold it?
So what do I hold? So we can go to Scripture. We can go to what we know of God and say, that's something that I can hold on to. And speak those things into the lives of our children and process with them what they're feeling, what they're experiencing. Same things, John, your ministry in your house?
Yeah. I think just from a personal experience, probably our little that has had the most anxiety throughout this whole thing. He's also the most verbal, which I probably just said who it is. But anyway, that is something that I've seen coming out from him in those anxious moments is lies that he, Satan or whatever, has built up in his mind, and it's coming out. And then I noticed that in myself as well, that just these times of isolation, they're getting fed this lie, and it's feeding into those fears. And so it's just those times where we've had to really step in and say, no, that is not true, and really speak to those. And again, another lesson for us.
To keep our time a little bit in check here, let me ask one last question, and then want to give you guys a chance to just share maybe a resource that we might be looking forward to.
Yeah.
What's something that our families or our individuals that do not have children at home, what's something that they should know about what's happening with our children, and maybe something that a role they can play?
I would just say that something that I've seen is that they also need you as the church. That they need those influences. We've seen these statistics, the research of who's influencing our kids' spiritual lives. They're obviously the parents. We want them, or families, to be the directors, but they also need outside influences in their lives to be mentors, and sometimes they just are not going to listen to me or dad or whoever. And we want them to run to other spiritual leaders in their lives. And so I would just say, contacting them however you can in a safe way is something that I would encourage. Writing cards, and we had so many people contributing to the children's ministry, doing videos and just reminding our kids, and through drive-bys and all that kind of stuff. And we really appreciate that. And I think those are just good reminders that they're people in our church family that really are family, you know, and
So, Mike, could you fill us in, tell us about some resources that we might be looking forward to?
Yeah. Well, last fall, Danielle and I got to go to this conference called D6 in Orlando, and we were learning about this curriculum that's for kind of family ministry and connecting the church and the home. So we have just confirmed by all of our prayers that this is the direction. Initially it's a curriculum switch, but really it's a philosophy and a model of how the church and home can work together. And so hopefully by the end of 2020, we are going to start equipping parents with resources that pair with the Sunday lesson that they're hearing from ages 0 to 18. They will be hearing the same lesson. So if it's Joseph in the colorful coat, we're going to have the application for the infant all the way to the 18-year-old. But then, you know, before they come hear that lesson, we're going to send something to the parents. This is what's coming. You know, Peter's family, we're going to be talking about Joseph with your children. So here are some things you can start talking about at home now, and then that will connect with what they've been talking about at home, and then we'll connect that with the Sunday lesson. So we're excited about that D6 curriculum launch. It'll just bring our homes and church together as one big family working together, so our kids know Christ. And, yeah.
Guys, thank you so much for being here. Mike, Danielle, you guys are great resources to this church. Happy to know you guys and call you guys friends. Thank you so much for joining us. Church family, thank you for being with us today. You guys have a blessed week.
Thanks for having us.
On the way, the valley, and He's guiding me.